In my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing. Be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you should take hold of this, and from that withhold not your hand. For the one who fears God shall come out from both of them. Ecclesiastes 7:15-18.
This is a difficult passage of Scripture to understand. What do you mean, Solomon? Ought we to be less holy, less wise? How on earth could somebody be overly righteous, given that righteousness exalts a people? Proverbs 14:34, which Solomon wrote, by the way, that we are called as well to be holy like God the Father is holy, 1 Peter 1:16-17. And that unless our righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, we won't see the kingdom of heaven, Matthew 5:20. Is Solomon really telling us to take it easy in the pursuit of holiness and wisdom? In this episode of Bright Hearth, we'll discover that far from a call to embrace mediocrity and sinfulness, this passage in Ecclesiastes 7 offers us practical help in keeping our ships from running aground on a few hidden reefs that have put a hole in many a passing vessel. Join us as we talk about hyper-scrupulosity, self-indulgence, and what these have to do with the productive Christian household. Well, welcome back to Bright Hearth, everybody. Brian here, joined by my lovely wife and current human incubator, Lexy.
Ow.
Lexy, oh, did you hurt yourself?
Just kicked that. Ow.
What
Yeah,
did you
fine.
kick?
I'm fine.
Lexy kicking a
Fine.
dresser? Say no to self-harm.
Bad timing. Hello, everybody.
And we're also joined by unknown baby number 1. Say hi to everybody, baby. Baby has not been born. It's like April 28th when this comes out. We're recording it in mid-March because this baby's finna be born pretty soon. Yeah, because we're so on top of things. That's why. Also joined here by Cyril. Cyril, say hi to the people.
Hi.
Cyril, our buddy for this episode, is just chilling with us here. Wanted to hang out with mom and dad. Not in the midst of a discipline or anything like that. And so, you know, hanging out with mom and dad. But it's good to have little
Being a
Cyril here.
helper.
Yeah, he is. He is a big helper. He's a very smart kid. Aren't you, Cyril? All right. Well, in this episode, we're talking about, we're centering a discussion on this passage from Ecclesiastes 7 to talk about some themes that I think, and I see these reefs a lot, and people run aground in them a lot, I think. And this passage is one that is a little bit strange and opaque. It can be a difficult passage to understand, but once I think you understand it, it unlocks quite a bit of helpfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Helpfulness, that's the word I'm looking for, to many, many different aspects of life, but certainly not least of which would be the productive Christian household. And the book of Ecclesiastes generally is kind of like that.
Yeah, it's a good book.
You get to it in your Bible reading plan, and you're kind of like, what is going on here?
So good. Have you read Joy at the End of the Tether?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Joy at the End of the Tether is a great book. Ecclesiastes is basically an extended meditation on the meaning of life and the nature of life under the sun, and then also of life under the rule of God. So it's kind of like it's investigating many of the perceived problems of life under the sun, like a perceived injustices, the righteous, suffering, and the unrighteous flourishing. It explores a lot of themes of wealth and pleasure and wisdom and work. And the preacher in the book basically takes up and tests his heart with all sorts of pleasures and pains, and ends up discovering that the sum of the thing is to fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. But the way in which he gets to that conclusion in Ecclesiastes 12, I think is fascinating, because it's very relatable once you understand what he's saying and you start to unlock sort of seeing through his eyes what it actually looks like to fear God and keep his commandments as a real human being under the sun. So in this episode, we're going to work through a couple different headings here. We'll try to talk through that key passage, Ecclesiastes 7:15-18, what it means, the point that we're trying to get at here. And then we'll work through some key questions and application from this passage, and then end with some just real practical like solutions and tips to avoid the hidden reefs. Let me say the sort of thesis summary up front of what I want us to see in this passage first, which is that there is such thing as both Pharisaical hyper-scrupulosity, and I'll explain what I mean by that, and reckless self-indulgence. And we need to avoid both of these. I'm thinking of them as reefs under the water because they're ready to shipwreck people, both of those hidden reefs, and they're different. They're almost opposite errors, and they're both real errors. And one of them is easier to see than the other, but both of them are important to understand and avoid. So let's talk about the passage really quick, briefly, and work through what it means just on a high level, and then get, work our way to that summary thesis. This passage really challenges this like a simplistic or transactional view of divine providence and justice, or God's blessing and his cursing. He says, he gives us an example of how he sees a righteous man. There's a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness. There's a wicked man who prolongs his life in evil doing. And then he makes this strange application to our ear: be not overly righteous. Don't make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. Why should you die before your time? And then this conclusion: it's good that you should take hold of this, and from that withhold not your hand, for the one who fears God shall come out from both of them. One of the keys to understanding passages like this is that Solomon constantly evaluates things on two different levels. And he evaluates them on this first level of life under the sun. Basically, what would it be like if all there was life under the sun? If all there was there was no God, like the John Lennon question, imagine there's no heaven, above us only sky, all of that nonsense. And then he steps above that frequently and grabs onto this transcendent divine wisdom, factoring heaven in, and then harmonizing what appears foolish or what appears unjust or what appears absurd even. And then he harmonizes it under the fear of God, but not in an overly simplistic or wooden way. And I think that's what he's doing in this passage. So again, he's challenging this simplistic transactional view of divine providence, where you can look around and just know, you can judge everything by what you see. Oh, there's a righteous man. Well, certainly he'll be doing very well and nothing bad will ever happen to him. And therefore, if anything bad happens to anybody, they must be really particularly wicked and bad. And because, of course, God, blesses good things and judges bad things. And so
it's like Job's friends.
It's exactly like Job's friends. And Job is a perfect example of a person who destroys that entire paradigm. That's just not how it works. In the fullness of all things, God works everything together in his long, slow, fine-tuned plan to perfect justice and perfect righteousness and all this perfect blessing and perfect cursing. But under the sun, when you measure with human eyes and according to human timescales, you often get things wrong. So when the preacher says not to be overly righteous or make yourself too wise, I think it's important that we understand that he's not actually telling us not to be righteous and to be fools. He's not actually advocating folly and sinfulness as a pursuit, but he's warning against self-righteousness, legalistic and exaggerated pursuit of wisdom and righteousness that's divorced from a true fear of God, that recognizes God's providential rule over all things, that he can curse and he can bless and he can give and he can take away, but blessed be the name of God. So I think of like flashy, externally rigorous righteousness of the Pharisees as an example of what of what the preacher in Ecclesiastes is rebuking, or like the excessively fastidious nature of their righteousness. And I'm using that in scare quotes. And then verse 18 sort of provides a key to the passage. It's good that you should take hold of this, and from that withhold not your hand, for the one who fears God shall come out from both of them. Well, hey, everybody, consider this your official invite to join us here in Ogden, Utah for our annual New Christendom Press Conference this June 12th to the 14th. We're going to be having a great time. Lots of great speakers, live episode of the King's Hall, live episode of Haunted Cosmos. I'll be putting on a concert, a singles mixer, a pastor's breakfast, a business mixer, a VIP hangout. We've got it all, and you need to go to newchristendompress.com/2025, link in the description, to get tickets and more information. We hope to see you there. What are you waiting for? Are you tired of all the plastic toys that are cheaply made in China? How about the greenwashing that comes with wooden toys covered in harmful chemicals, yet claiming they're safe for littles because the FDA said so? Well, look no further. At Rooted Pines Homestead, husband and wife, along with their 5 young children, work together as a family economy to create handmade, natural wooden toys and goods that can be passed down to future generations in small batch organic and wild-crafted herbal remedies. From using locally sourced wood to coloring toys with real foods and plants, they deliver various types of wooden products that are coated with only 2 ingredients: local beeswax and organic expeller-pressed coconut oil. Talk about food safe. Their family values include being good stewards, making sure that their products are the highest quality and not harmful to families, homes, or our environment. They also teach free herbalism on their YouTube channel for those wanting to take back what New Agers have tried to distort in worshiping creation rather than the Creator. Why support the big companies who knowingly use cheap, toxic ingredients because it's better on their pocket when you can get 10% off your order using code BrightHearth10, that's all caps, BrightHearth10, to support your brothers and sisters in Christ at Rooted Pines Homestead. Check out the show notes for more details and connect with them on social media. Attention business owners. Proverbs tells us, in the multitude of counselors, there is victory. At KeepWise Partners, we aim to apply this principle to your business as you work to build Christendom in your labors. Running a small business is challenging, but you don't have to go it alone. KeepWise Partners offers expert bookkeeping services with the care and integrity you'd expect from a partner who shares your values. And to take it a step further, our advisory services bring invaluable insights to you as you aim to meet your business goals. Visit keepwisepartners.com or call Derrick Taylor at 781-680-8000 to schedule a free consultation. KeepWise Partners, bringing finance and accounting excellence to the way you build your business. This passage reminds me of a later passage in the book in chapter 9 where Solomon says, as another sort of concluding, summarizing point, go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments always be white. Let oil not be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. So it's like this. It's this balance between, yes, we are to take hold of this with our hand, enjoy it. God approves of it. He made you for this. It's in your nature. Go enjoy life under the sun. Go enjoy your wife. Go enjoy your kids. Go enjoy the pleasures that God has put in the world. Don't be overly fastidiously righteous to where you're like embracing this faux righteous asceticism. But on the other hand, know that these things, if that's all there are, they're vanity. If you don't factor in the ultimate fear of God and his providential rule over all things. But if you fear God and you go do those things and then trust him in the results, whether he determines to bless or withhold, and I mean like under the sun reckoning, bless and withhold. He always blesses his people in light of eternity. But whether he decides to prosper you in something or not prosper you in something, trust him in the meantime. So the passage, I think you could say there is such thing as this person who is being too righteous. They're being overly righteous. They're being overly wise. And that, I would say, is Pharisaical hyper-scrupulosity is the term that I think of around that. And then there's this other side of being wicked. Reckless self-indulgence is what I would call that don't do that either. And these are the two reefs that we're trying to avoid if we understand this passage.
For those who are not Brian, scrupulosity would be like too much attention to detail.
Exactly. It's like an extreme attention to detail, or like being so thorough and obsessive compulsively thorough about a thing. Yes. So for, an example of this, and we'll get into a lot of examples here and try to make this practical because I know it's kind of up in the air right now, but think about someone who is hyper scrupulous about the clothing that they wear.
Yeah, you said that. I didn't understand what you meant by that per se, though.
They're like, nothing artificial shall touch this body.
Okay.
There shall be no remnants of rayon touching this sacred temple. And so,
So I have to dress like I look like a box from now on, is what you're saying.
and there's like there's a reasonable way of pursuing a good conviction that you have about what the healthiest type of clothing is or something like that. And then there's like a hyper scrupulous way of approaching it where all of a sudden you start thinking down this line of thought. This is how, and hyper scrupulosity can be like an actual diagnosed mental disorder.
Yes.
In the psychiatric world. So you could picture someone who is hyper scrupulous in this way. They're like, they get all their clothes cotton, whatever, you can do that. That's not that hard. But then they start to think and they're like, wait, but carpet is made out of artificial fibers. And, like it produces a lot of like dust in the air and things like that. So then they start really worrying about that. And then they're like, well, I can control what I wear, but I can't control what kind of carpet my friends' houses have. So I can't go to my friend's house. And if I do, I need to stay on the tile. And but even if I'm on the tile, maybe there's particles in the air. And so I can't.
Wow, you've gone down this rabbit hole.
That would be an absurd example of someone being hyper scrupulous. A biblical example would be of the kind of fake hyper scrupulous righteousness that Jesus rebukes in the Pharisees, is that they would tithe mint and dill and cumin, but then they would neglect the weightier matters of the law. So they didn't love justice or mercy, but they were like, oh, but I got to make sure that nobody would accuse me of failing to tithe on the increase of my goods. And so any of the spices that I have in my cupboard, if I'm going to use a tablespoon for the bread, I better have a tenth of the tablespoon and, tithe it to the temple. And at the same time, they were being hypocritical.
Being jerks to their kids, probably.
Yeah. It was the guy that said it's Corban. Like, I can't give it to you, family member. I have to give it to the temple. But really, they were just trying to avoid the weighty matters of the law. So what I wanted to do was just talk through some ways that this shows up, put some meat on this idea, ways that both that Pharisaical hyper-scrupulosity, being too holy, too righteous, and I'm using that in scare quotes because I think that's what Solomon is doing, and on the other hand, reckless self-indulgence. I want to talk about some of the ways that this can be particularly tempting for Christians building productive Christian households and communities, and how we can fight against falling into these ditches. So another way you can think about this is like purity spiraling on the hyper-scrupulosity side, and then on the other, being too evil, the reckless self-indulgence is just like
grace.
Exactly.
I was thinking of Romans, actually.
God will take care of our bodies. He'll take care of us. Everything's made holy by the word of God and prayer. Therefore, I eat whatever I want at any time, and I give no care to it whatsoever. So let's talk about some of these categories. You mentioned when we were talking about this episode idea ahead of time, you said that health stuff is an area where these reefs, people run aground on these reefs with regularity. Can you give us some examples of that?
I think just the biggest principle that's often neglected when people start walking down the crunchy road is realizing like stress and anxiety is sin. And that's actually like worse for you than eating a chia seed if you're like anti-estrogen or whatever.
Is there estrogen in chia seeds?
I think. I haven't finished my research on the topic, therefore. But yeah, it's like something that a lot of people say to avoid now.
See, I didn't even know this.
There you go. I know. I'm trying to be super niche about it.
There's a new thing to avoid.
But that's a perfect example right there of like you're being so detail oriented, but it's causing stress and anxiety and worry in all these other ways that is literally probably worse for you than maybe getting the occasional chia seed in your mouth. I know it's a silly example, but
no, I think that's true. When it comes to health stuff, this is a temptation because we can think about how logical this chain of reasoning is. Like people say, what is at stake when I'm thinking as a homemaker, as a woman in my home? What is at stake with the food and the medicine and the health care and the things that we do in our home? The very lives of my children and my loved ones, my husband's life, my wife, my children's lives. This is very important. It's a central part of my duty. And that is true.
it is true, yeah.
That is a central part of the vocation of a homemaker, is like literally keeping people from dying by providing food and even medicine and things like that for members of their family. So they're not wrong to think that. But what you can do then is you can start to go down the line and make and come to begin to think of every single decision as a life or death decision. Where there's like, if I do the wrong thing, or even something that is a little bit of the wrong thing, like it's not perfect.
It's almost like there's not enough wisdom and experience or time or humility to help the person think in categories or tiers, I guess.
Triage.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, give you an example would be, I've literally heard people say this, that using dish detergent or Dawn dish soap is literally murder.
Violation of the
and they meant that
commandments.
Literally. They meant it's violating the commandment against murder because, and then they would give a whole argument for why certain dish soap or Dawn dish soap or, cleaning agents are toxic, or they have all these, they're hormone they're all these bad things. And there might be some argument that they can have that effect. But it's like not making the distinction between shooting somebody in the head and killing them immediately and allowing somebody to eat slightly more than the recommended daily value of a certain nutrient or a certain food that, might shorten their lifespan on average by a month over their whole lifespan, something like that.
I really like how you pointed out earlier, though, that I hadn't thought about this before, but that the key to the passage is fear of God.
Yeah.
Because even with some of these health related things, you have to think about that. Like, but am I obeying the 10 commandments? Do I love the Lord? Okay, that's where my hope is then, not in what I am or am not eating or washing my clothing or what kind of clothes I'm wearing. Like,
yeah.
So that was helpful to see that in the context of that passage, that is the key to navigating this is, but are you doing it with the fear of the Lord in mind, or with fear of estrogen in mind, or fat in mind, or
sugar,
whatever
it is, or chemicals.
Yeah.
That
was helpful.
What we tend to do is whichever of the reefs we're run aground on, we tend to point and laugh and mock the other reef. So the people who are run aground on the reef of hyper-scrupulosity with health and food, and like nothing will come through the doors of my house unless it is absolutely the highest standard of possible health promoting food and medical supplies or whatever it is, medical planning. What's the thing I'm looking for? Like,
I'm not sure.
Like crunchiness, is to put it overly simplistically. That person is likely to look at somebody run aground on the other ditch or on the other reef and say, and this is the person who's recklessly self-indulgent, or they're reckless when it comes to these things. They're just like, whatever. I don't care if my kids drink Mountain Dew Code Red whenever they want all the time.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, look at those idiots over there. And the person who's over on this other reef tends to look at the person on the crunchy reef or the hyper-scrupulosity reef and go, oh, look at them. They're such Pharisees and they're such. And the point is that when you fear God, you can properly weigh these things and you can come to a path, you can chart a path of wisdom through the real world, because you're constantly going to be hearing people who are trying to get you to buy into their whole system of scrupulosity. And this can be the no seed oils and no red dye. And this can be something completely different. It could be someone who's like intermittent fasting only, or someone who says, you have to basically go on my exact, maybe it's carnivore diet. You have to do something like my exact thing, and they're trying to sell you on that. We tend to notice the other ditch, but not notice the one we're in.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a frequent problem. So when it comes to health stuff, there's like a hyper-scrupulosity temptation, and this can be really bad. I mean, it can do weird things like making you break fellowship with other Christians around food. It can also do really unpleasant things like make you broke.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will only buy the best of the best. And so you find out that like it's very lucrative to be an influencer or sell things in these niches.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody's selling something that's wildly expensive to solve some problem that they've convinced you that you have surrounding food or medicine or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Or your kids are just hungry because you won't just go buy the grocery store pork. You only want the farm fresh everything all the time. So there's not actually enough food for everyone because you can't actually afford enough protein for everyone that way.
Yeah. So there's a ditch there. On the other side, I think it's easy to make fun of like crunchiness in people who are genuinely crunchy and I think have a good balance, like aren't hyper scrupulous, but are just generally like health conscious and that.
Yeah.
They will make fun of themselves.
They know their tricks around things. Yes. Yes.
Like that Instagram account that we always talk about. It's that wife who and her husband, and they make funny Instagram reels about crunchiness, and the wife plays different characters, and it shows that she's self-aware. Like she'll put on the character of the non-crunchy mom, and she has like a Coca-Cola t-shirt, and then she's eating like store-bought cake or something like that, and then the other mom is like she's judging her friends' cookies at Christmas based from smelling them, telling whether they use refined sugar or like coconut sugar or something. I'm not everybody who's crunchy is being hyper scrupulous. That's not the point. But it's sometimes also easy to forget that on the other side, there's the other reef of like reckless self-indulgence. And this is like extremely common in our culture as well when it comes to the exact same thing, when it comes to health.
Yeah. Who was I talking to? I don't remember. It was a friend. She was telling me, I think, about another family member recently that I remember. She's I guess you'd say like a crunchy alternative medical professional. And she had a family member who's not super crunchy coming to her for lots of help. And she's been on birth control for years and years. And she was like, no, I want help in this way. And she's like, no, really, you just probably need to get off the birth control. And she's like, no, let's try all these other things first. She's like, no, really, it's probably just the birth control. Get off the birth control. That's such a common example of like,
sure it's not my cooking oil.
Women just ruining their health with something like birth control because they're just taking it, not thinking about it.
Totally. It's like
what
totally
it's
normal.
doing. 7 years down the road, you're on antidepressants. Like it's all documented. Just open your eyes for a second. But it's just we do it without thinking.
I'm worried that the cooking oil I'm using is a hormone disruptor. While you intentionally take pills that alter your entire hormonal landscape every single day of your life.
Yeah.
It's like, hang on. I think too about, sometimes you can have, and I think sometimes this is families who just like grew up with an example of a certain thing in their life and their parents were this way. But like families where food standards are just, everybody's super fat all the time. Everybody's 100 pounds overweight by the time they're an adult.
Including the children. And that's just totally, and our genetics, right? And it's like, well, maybe that played a role, but maybe you're being recklessly self-indulgent and you're excusing an extreme lack of wisdom and discipline. And you actually just need to do hard work and say, would you rather have the hard work of losing the weight and eating more wisely and teaching your children how to eat? And like, would you rather have that hard, or would you like everybody to die when they're 55 and teach your children to be extremely unhealthy? Like there is such thing as we make fun of the crunchy person all the time, but the other side of the road, it's very real.
It's absolutely real. And if anything, is the far bigger problem in our culture today.
Yep.
Far bigger problem. Okay, so health stuff is one where there's a huge amount of hyper-scrupulosity, reef ramming, and also reckless self-indulgence, where it's just whatever kind of the received wisdom is. I think one of these two is when it comes to like working out and diet stuff, people get really convinced of a very specific thing
without remembering they're an individual.
And then they determine
before the Lord.
They determine that that's like the thing everybody must do now.
Yes.
And so they, take fasting is a big one right now. People will,
is it still pretty big?
Huge,
okay,
enormous, growing. People will get on different models of eating, the timing of eating. Like, are you an intermittent faster with an 8-hour eating window from noon to 8? Are you an OMAD person? Are you 1 meal a day? Are you like there's a one where there's like a 12-36 fasting window, 36 hours of fasting, 12 hours of eating, like whole thing. And people will do something and they'll find it works for them. And then they can become like an absolute evangelist for the thing and basically begin to judge everybody else around them.
Yeah.
For not adopting their exact model of the timing of eating.
Yeah.
And that is kind of a silly hyper-scrupulosity.
Very silly.
That should probably not rule your life or try to convince everybody of all the time. Okay, there's another category. I think that's an easy one to think about: health, organic stuff. Like that's one. But this is a tricky one. I'm thinking about things like entertainment standards, even for your children, like no TV, how does this work? Screens, no screens, that kind of thing in your house. I think there's an opportunity in this area for obviously reckless self-indulgence and for hyper-scrupulosity. Where would you see with some of those things that reckless self-indulgence side landing?
Oh, just like 10-year-olds having iPhones, 7-year-olds having iPhones.
They're not supposed to.
Like showing up at the park and all the little kids have iPhones. And I'm like, what? You can't, we got to go to a different park. My kids can't play with you.
This is a bad thing.
Well, yes, this is a bad thing. That's what I was trying to say.
What?
Sorry. Yes, this is a bad thing.
How are they going to watch YouTube?
They shouldn't watch YouTube without their mom and dad present.
How are they going to text their friends? How are they going to Snapchat their classmates?
It's always some weird lack of ideal that is not good to begin with. Like, well, mom and dad are divorced. He has to have a phone. Well, that's already not good to begin with. Really sucks for the kids, let's be honest. But it's already not ideal. So let's add something like a free roaming cell phone on top of the whole thing now. I know there's way more complications to it than that, guys. Believe me, I know. But yeah, cell phones are a really bad idea for young people.
Yeah, what about like TV watching, movie watching? What does it look like there?
Personally, how do I think about this?
Yeah, like what would it look like to be recklessly self-indulgent?
Oh, recklessly about it. Okay. Yeah, just all the time without consideration. Like letting that boss around mom and dad via children. They're being bossy about it. I think it's one clear indicator, at least I feel like, for us. And we're like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Or just like not talking to them about it, or talking like when you send them other places, like having a rule of, please call mom before to see if you can watch that, or like grandparents knowing what are mom and dad's standards. Some people have to learn the hard way that you should have talked about that beforehand, but you didn't. I guess, again, when I think of reckless in all of these categories, I'm thinking thoughtless.
Yeah, standardless.
Yeah. It'll all work out
flow.
in the wash.
Yeah, we don't want
Can't
to be
that
weird.
bad. I survived,
We don't want our kids to be weird.
Don't want them to be weird.
So what is just taking the temperature of culture? What is the background?
They have to watch the tranny cartoons.
What does everybody do? Well, we don't want our kids to not be doing what everybody's doing. What if what everybody's doing is really stupid? Then you should probably not do what everybody's doing.
And because
you'll be stupid too then.
When you have high standards for these things, be it like good food culture that's based on fellowship and Sabbath and quality food, then they really do start to know when something is going reckless.
Yeah.
You've cultivated their palate towards better things. And so that actually is a built-in protection in some ways from the opposite ditch, I guess.
Yes. So it's easy to identify like recklessness when it comes to these things because there's so much of it in our culture. It's by far the norm. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at the statistics for pornography use. Look, like, do you want your kids to be just absolutely dysfunctional, porn addicted losers? Just do what everybody else is doing because they're basically giving them a red carpet to all of that intentionally with a smartphone and with endless access to television and movies and whatever it is. And it's like, well, of course they have to see that movie because everybody's doing it. Of course they have to, be aware of this thing because everybody's doing it. Music, they can listen to whatever because, it's really popular and I don't want them to feel left out. There's obviously a lot of stuff. I think most of the people who listen to this podcast are probably not as likely to fall into that ditch. You're probably, or run aground on that reef, you're probably much more, you probably have standards. Like very few of our listeners are like, oh no, you're telling me I should go take all the iPhones from all my 8-year-olds and under? Yes, you should. If that's you, just
in fact, pause it right now because
go get it, turn it off. Don't give it back till they're like 22 or something, till they're married. I don't know.
When did you get a phone?
I was 16 when I got my first T9, with the buttons. T9 texting version because I got my license and they were like, you have to have a cell phone now. And I said, Mom and Dad, you didn't have a cell phone when you started driving.
Oh, so you didn't want one.
I didn't want one.
You were annoyed? Okay.
Well, because I was thinking like free. I was thinking play CCR. Some folks made
CCR?
to wave the flag. And I'm going to be driving my Ford Taurus off into the sunset. Absolutely no strings attached.
Cell phone. Okay, that's funny.
I am free and I'm free.
But now you're not because Mom can call you on the phone.
Now I'm free. Ring, ring, ring. And I was like, and phones couldn't do anything useful other than that.
That's
funny.
Like
what I couldn't listen to music on my phone at this point.
No.
I had an MP3. I know I had a
You
mini
literally
disc
had to
player.
text by like pressing the number a whole bunch of times.
Yeah, kids have no idea how to. Kids these days. I got my first smartphone after I was already a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because it was the church number. And then for some time, I maintained
had two phones
two numbers
for a while.
Because the church
your dumb phone and your smartphone.
It got like an iPhone 4. And they're like, here's the church number. You're answering that phone. I have some funny stories from answering the church phone.
Yes.
And then I had my own little flippy that I actually used. So anyway, yeah, the whole like recklessness is everywhere. On the other side, though, this is where I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about the justice of at least like the potential partial justice of one of the criticisms that people can have of like conservative Christians, homeschooling fundamentalist types of our sort, right? Which is that you are sheltering your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my first reaction, and my reaction to about 90% of that critique, to be clear, is in praise of bunkers. Shelters are good.
Of course we are.
If there are bombs falling, I want them in a shelter, right? Mm-hmm. So definitely protect your children, grow them up. However, I think that there is a reef here. I think there is such thing as hyper-scrupulosity on this front. And I actually think that there is merit as your children grow older to have introduced planned introduction of reality into their lives. As they're trained, and when I say reality, I don't mean that your home is not reality. It is reality. Like the shelter is reality.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean opening up the window, the putting your eye up to the slit
yes.
on the bunker and peering out into the wilderness like a zoo and observing the flora and fauna of the culture, of what the animals are doing, and teaching your kids how to look at that and not get shipwrecked by it or get totally tempted by it. But like, what do you think about that?
What I'm trying to give me an example.
Give you an example. So, I watched a movie with our kids the other day.
The one I've probably been annoyed by all week.
Potentially, yeah. I watched a movie with our kids the other day, and I made sure, I've seen this movie before, even growing up. It's an old movie. And I knew that it wasn't that it was full of a ton of bad words or something, or like, of course, I'm not going to show my kids any like overt sexuality stuff, like bad stuff. Like I'm just not. They're like oldest is
An adult doesn't need to see that.
Oldest is 11, so like we're just starting to peak over the thing. But I did know that this movie had like several archetypal bad men, bad women, bad people. And so I'm just like, let's just do a little training check. Let's see how they're doing.
What happens.
So we watched it, whatever. It's a funny movie. It was fine. And then I asked them right afterward, what did you guys think about, this character? Oh, she was bad. She was so bossy. She was always telling her husband.
Yeah, it is funny how they
not to be bossed around, but then she was bossing him around the whole time.
Funny.
I didn't tell them to say this, by the way. I didn't coach them. I didn't prep them. I just wanted to know, like, what are they absorbing from our instruction? They immediately identified the woman in the movie. They're like, she is a naggy woman. And then, they proceeded to diagnose several other characters. And it was like, you're right, kids. That's good. What is that? Where does the Bible teach it? So they saw it. They diagnosed it. And they responded to it correctly because they're going to go into the world and they're going to see bossy women and passive men and unself-controlled men and women, and they're going to see hoes and they're going to see all sorts of stuff. And I'm not saying like surround them with hoes so that they can learn how to deal with hoes, but they are going to see that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I want them to learn. Some of it's like that sort of thing. I mean, but even going to the mall is a good example of when this happens.
Yeah.
We don't just avoid going to places where there are going to be real people.
Well, we do avoid some places a lot.
We do avoid some places mainly because we don't want to be there. But hey, friends, let's talk about Gray Toad Tallow. They're a family-owned small business dedicated to making products that nourish your skin with the purest, most wholesome ingredients. For centuries, people have experienced the moisturizing and healing properties of tallow, and Gray Toad Tallow is committed to sharing these benefits their family has experienced with you. Besides their commitment to offering you a healthy skincare option for your family, Gray Toad Tallow's desire is to remain affordable and accessible to be a blessing to others. For more information and to try a balm sample pack, visit graytoadtallow.com. That link will be in the description along with this code, which we would urge you not to forget to use for 15% off your order. That code is all caps, BRIGHT15, BRIGHT15 for 15% off your order, and we truly appreciate your business. If you have a young family like me, you work hard every day to ensure you care for your wife and kids. Providing for a young family is challenging with rising costs. It doesn't look like things are going to change in the future. Maybe you've thought like I have, I wish I'd started investing years ago. My family would be in a better financial position. As they say about trees, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. Don't let the benefit of time go to waste on your financial planning for retirement or inheritance for your generations. Joe Garrissey with Backwards Planning Financial has been working with us to make the best plan for our family. He's a Christian who works with one of the largest and most trusted financial service companies in the world. He's been helping Lexi and I work towards our financial goals and helps us navigate the complexities of the markets. Whether you have millions in assets or you're just starting to invest, Joe Garrissey can help you reach your goals to grow the kingdom and leave a good legacy for your generations. Visit backwardsplanningfinancial.com. That's backwardsplanningfinancial.com. Or call 615-767-2555 to speak with Joe to prepare for the future. The testimonials presented may not be representative of the experience of other clients and are not a guarantee of future performance or success. Here at Bright Hearth, we're all about helping you not turn into a girl if you're a boy, or into a boy if you're a girl. You know what might be doing that to you? The soap in your shower. And so we are pleased to introduce you to IndigoSundrySoap.com, link in the description, of course, who can provide you with soaps and more without any of the nasty stuff. And because they love you, they're giving you a discount code, guys. So use code, all caps, Bright Hearth for 10% off your whole order. Support this great Christian company and support Bright Hearth Podcast at the same time. Check them out at IndigoSundrySoap.com. And of course, that link is in the description. There's an aspect of sheltering that can veer into hyper-scrupulosity, where you begin to teach your children, like the lesson they're taking away is be very, very afraid of the world. Because if you make contact with it for 1 second, you're probably going to immediately spiral into deep, dark sin. And it's like, well, no, I want to teach my kids to fear God and to hate evil so that they look at it and they're not tempted by it.
Especially something like entertainment, where if you have passed on a worldview, they should be able to interact at face value with the content and make an actual assessment of it.
Yes. Even on some of the normal, just day-to-day, non-like moral lesson sort of stuff, I think that we can easily be tempted into purity spiraling and start thinking things like, well, I've failed completely if my kids ever interact with a screen until they're 20. And it's like, I don't think that's the case, actually. I think that screens are inevitable in the world that we live in. Our kids are going to need to learn how to navigate them.
Well, yeah. And I just think of it as a tool. And I think of it seasonally, too. I don't know. Maybe it's because we're in Utah where the winters are long
and dark.
Maybe you Floridians don't think about it this way, but it's like, it's okay that it's Christmas and we're watching more movies together.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
In the wintertime, the rhythm of our house, just so everybody can like get a little glimpse, there's plenty of times through the winter when we're watching a show together or watching a golf thing on YouTube.
Because I know that there's plenty of time in the summer when I'm having to drag them all inside muddy to take showers and get in bed, where they don't want anything to do with the television because they'd rather be at the creek.
Yep. It's one of the reasons I got the YouTube premium thing. So that there were no ads, because the ads were a big problem. Like the ads are terrible.
Oh, that's true.
And constant. So it's like, get rid of the ads. And then I'm not as worried. I can tell the kids like, hey, you're allowed to watch this thing if you have permission and it's going to be okay. There's going to be limits. Or I think about the video game thing. Some people are like, oh, if your kids ever touch a video game, they're so immature. They're probably just these fake macho, like whatever. But here's the thing. People are allowed to enjoy things. And some people like playing video games. We're not a video game home. I'm not defending myself here.
I don't like video games. It's not a moral issue. I just don't like it.
I just don't like it.
I don't like the culture surrounding it. I don't like it.
I've never been interested in them that much,
Neither
so we don't play them. Yeah. But I know people where the dad and the sons or daughters will play a game together, and it's a healthy, moderated. The games are fine that they're playing, and they play Mario Kart or whatever, and it's a good time. And they're all friends. And it's like there is a type of personality that tends towards the purity spiral that can try to come up with a reason to make that into a sin. And you're like, well, but what if it's not a sin? What if it's a preference?
Yeah, you should just be able to say, I really don't like video games.
And that's fine.
Want to spend my time doing that or having my family do that. It's not, you don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to.
And I can say that
into it too much
without imposing.
Yes.
And getting somewhat into the, like, there's a lot of blending here, but solutions and tips to avoid these kind of reefs. Like, one thing we really need to make sure we're doing is not to impose our opinions on everyone, and not to and not to fail to distinguish between my opinions and preferences and the commands of God. So this is a perfect example. It is not a command of God that people never play video games. It's also not a command of God or a dogma of Holy Scripture that if people like to play video games, they must be basement-dwelling losers who never have a job and they're just lowlifes. I know people who play video games who are extremely successful, good parents, godly Christians, that sort of thing. So even while our opinion of video games is rather low, Lexi and I just dispositionally, like we never have been into them, there's no part of me that desires to go buy a console and start playing video games. I'm just not interested in it. But I do like playing golf. Lexi likes knitting. Yours are always better. Yours always have some kind of use. Like, at least you get a blanket out of it.
Well, that's the idea.
Eventually. A blanket a year. But we need to distinguish between our opinions about things and the commands of God, and be careful to do that. lest we fall into the ditch of hyper-scrupulous, pharisaical teaching as commandments, the traditions of men, was one of the things that they did. I think modesty is another area where this can happen. We are very pro-modesty in this house. And there's an obvious, I see our published works, but there's a huge area, again, where like 90% of the culture is shipwrecked on the reef of total immodesty. Reckless self-indulgence, evil, bellies out, other things out all the time. Bad.
Mm-hmm.
See our published works. But then there is, I think, a hyper-scrupulosity that we could kick in with something like modesty and clothing. Can you think of any examples specifically of how you might go wrong in this direction?
You said something on Sunday. I don't remember the exact context, but it was about head coverings, like if you're going to start measuring head coverings at the door.
Yeah, like because there are varying convictions about how big a head covering ought to be, even within the head covering world.
Oh, yeah.
Like, should it cover all your hair? Should it cover some of it? Is a headband that's like a fairly wide, 4-inch wide headband, is that sufficient? Or does it need to be a full bonnet? Like, and there is it's fine to have a conviction about that and to have an opinion from history and tradition and scripture, because it's in 1 Corinthians 11. But Paul doesn't give a size in the passage. He actually doesn't. And elsewhere, he even says things that makes it seem like some of the woman's hair was visible in public, because he said, don't let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair, the wearing of jewelry, all this stuff. So there's an opportunity there for us to become hyper-scrupulous and confuse our own conviction or opinion about what the nature of the covering should be, and then begin to judge one another unrighteously, be schismatic, be catty or rude about this sort of thing. I think there are other examples with modesty.
What are you thinking?
One example would be take dresses. If you were trying to get as far away from if you start thinking about it as getting as far away from the line as possible, where a far away from debatable as possible, then you could intentionally embrace frumpiness.
Yeah, I can think of an example,
valorize it.
Actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was talking with an older lady. Well, it was actually a very large group of women that we were talking about the problem of swimsuits. We live in the desert where there's a lot of outdoorsy, swimmy type things you can do. And we were just talking about, we wish there were more like flattering options that weren't revealing, but that actually covered. And this lady was like, oh, what you just need is you need a rash guard from this is what I got from her wrist all the way down to her ankles. And I was like, actually, I'm not scared of the sun though. Like that's not, to me, that was going too far. I'm like, that's not what I'm after either though.
Yeah.
So.
And the main problem would be if you begin to mistake your exact reification of the standard into the Platonic ideal of the standard. Like your exact, how you stick the landing on. Yeah. Because I think there's some good broad principles that are in scripture. We've brought them up before, like generally from the neck to the knees, we want to be covered.
Yeah, that made it sound like
covering the nakedness.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. Like there are many options of clothing.
Bikinis are not them.
So there's things that are obviously out. Bikinis, you're not wearing thongy thongs in public. Please no, stop doing that. Oh my gosh. People do it.
Oh, oh my gosh.
If you're wearing your belly shirts, Lexi's constantly wearing belly shirts right now because she's 9 months pregnant and they creep up.
It's getting warm, you guys. Kidding. It's hot, kind of, not today, but now I'm like, well, I have 3 weeks. I'm not buying spring maternity clothes. I'm not. No. Anyways,
I'm just messing with you.
I'm thinking about that experience we had last summer.
What happened? Is it Bright Hearth appropriate?
I don't know. We were with my family, my extended family, and the Garretts. And we had multiple weird things because we had the trannies at the pool. We had the trannies at the pool, and then we had the person in the thong. And I went and talked to the guy. And he was like, actually, we've had to consult a lawyer about this because we have this problem, which I was thankful for. He was like, moms come to us all the time. They get really worried about having their little kids here when women are walking around in thongs.
It
And
was
I was
a
like,
woman.
yeah, they should be worried. And the attorney's like, said there's nothing you can do unless they're showing genitalia. I'm like,
Oh my goodness.
do you remember this? You don't remember?
Vaguely.
It was a hilarious, because here we are, we're all like refuge folk that we just kind of hang out together and do our own thing at the lake. And so we go out to the pool together and we're like, is this what the real world is
this real
like?
life?
No, thanks.
Nah.
We'll go play in our backyard.
Yeah, nah.
Anyways.
So there's things that are obviously out, but then there's like your exact sticking of the landing of how to obey the principle. And if you begin to mistake your exact sticking of the landing with the principle itself, that's where you really run into this error where you start, even if you're just doing it in your heart, you're looking around and you're like, think about how easy this is. Let's say a woman's wearing a dress. It's has adequate coverage, but it's maybe like, you would be further from the line if it was slightly less clingy. And it's not skin tight. It's not obviously like whatever, but it's just not exactly how you would do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I don't know. Well, all right. They're going to answer to their master.
Mm-hmm.
There's not an obvious principle that's being violated. You actually do need to then go, there's a distinction between my opinion about exactly how to reify this principle and the command of God to cover your nakedness, not be immodest in public, that sort of thing.
That's why I think isn't it in Romans where Paul says each is to be convinced in his own mind?
Yes, there are situations where Paul authorizes us to have conscience convictions about debatable matters.
And I think that probably means informed, not uninformed, but informed.
Yeah, informed. You couldn't just say like, well, my conscience says it's fine to use pornography.
No.
Paul would be like, well, your conscience is wrong.
It's in the same chapters where he is, basically saying do not sin so that grace may abound. So
and in the context of conscience issues with meat sacrificed to idols, Paul even gives the right answer and yet still says don't sin against your conscience.
Mm-hmm.
If you're still not strong enough to eat the meat, because the meat's nothing, eat anything in the meat market without questions of conscience, 1 Corinthians 10. But if you have a question of conscience still, you're still a weaker brother. Don't sin against your conscience. Don't train yourself to violate your conscience because you're not acting in faith. Then it's not righteous. I
just want to comment on that because I don't think enough people realize it's not sinning against your preference. You don't want to sin against your conscience because you don't want to be training yourself to sin. Like there is a difference there. You have to be able to tell, is this genuinely a conscience issue for me? Or is this just some sort of propped up righteousness that I have imposed on myself?
Right. I prefer.
Yes. And again, say it's a preference. It's fine. Totally say that.
Yeah,
but you also have to understand the conscience issue is there so that you are training yourself in righteousness, not unrighteousness.
Yeah. Like you could have a preference for there being no video games in your home.
Yes.
And it's well within the authority of a husband in his home to say, we're not going to have video games in this house. I'm not saying they're sinful and that nobody else in the world is allowed to have video games.
Oh my gosh.
It snowed while Lexi. I've been watching it the whole time over your shoulder.
Sorry.
But yeah, I mean, it would be fine for a husband to do that. It's well within his authority in his home to enforce a preference. Like our preference is that kids are in bed at a certain age at 7:30. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go knock on the door of every house in our church and be like, are your kids in bed at 7:30?
No, as a matter of fact, I don't have enough time to go busybody.
No.
Unless someone comes to me specifically with a question, I'm not even going to open my mouth. Even if I see a conversation going on, I don't care. Like, don't have time for that. If you ask me, I will give you my very robust opinion.
Sure.
But I don't have the time or energy to go imposing it on other people.
Yeah. So some final thoughts here on how to avoid these hidden reefs. On the one hand, we need to not allow ourselves to be undisciplined, self-indulgent, giving way to our flesh, and just calling it Christian freedom. Like in this matters and all the things we discussed in health and modesty and entertainment. And there's many areas where this touches. And on the other hand, we need to avoid pharisaical, externalist, hyper-scrupulosity, where we're imposing and teaching the traditions of men as the commandments of God, and even just the traditions of my opinion as the command.
Yeah, make sure you
God.
can distinguish between.
Some of the things I think that help with this, not taking yourself as seriously as you might be tempted to, because the flesh wants to think that it is God. And so it's very easy to see how you would begin to think that all of your opinions are the commands of God, because your flesh is like, I'm basically God. So of course my opinions are the opinions of the divine. And so of course everybody should obey them. We need to be careful that we're not taking ourselves that seriously. Again, the solution is to fear God.
Yes.
And keep his commandments, his actual commandments. So we need to know what those are and not impose our own fake ones on everybody. For women, something Lexy mentioned before we started recording, and maybe you could explain this a little bit, but you talked about letting your husband lead in some of these issues.
I just think if you know that you're a woman who might be prone to like over research, over obsess, over worry, under pray, I think it's really a wise practice to ask your husband to set boundaries for you. Be it like, okay, what's the time period I'm allowed to try this diet for? Because it's not going to be for the next decade of my life. He might say 6 months and we'll see how it goes. What is I don't know. I want some new linen dresses for my birthday. You give me a budget. Or you buy them for me. Like, you know, this is a desire I have for this good thing. It's interesting to me. I'd love to sweat less in the summertime. Get me some linen dresses. Or a husband that just, this is more the approach that we often take, where you will give me full freedom to go research a whole bunch of things. And then you'll say, like, bring me the information and we'll figure it out together. So that she's not just like off in her own little digital cave of like anxiety and worry through Instagram reels. Yeah. She's actually having like an injection of leadership, positive leadership in there. Somebody who is not also trying to manipulate her with her pocketbook. So I just think it can be really helpful to keep an ongoing conversation going with your husband.
Along with that, I mean, something that's related to the process you just described, it's being slow or slowing ourselves down in adopting a whole new orthodoxy on a subject.
Yes.
That we just heard about for the first time recently. So this can be with food, clothing, health, medicine, EMFs, seed oils, whatever the thing is. We just need to be slow. Fasting diet, carnivore, whatever it is. Like being slow to accept a whole new orthodoxy on a subject. Because the thing is, social media and online influence is designed and calculated to persuade us quickly of things.
I even think the passage that we read from Ecclesiastes had a really good point in there about, I don't remember the exact wording, but like, you don't want to kill yourself.
Yeah.
Literally, that's what you can do when you start to go.
Don't be too wise. Why should you destroy yourself?
Yeah.
Like, wait a second. And he's not talking about true wisdom before God, which fears God and thinks clearly about these things. He's talking about this faux wisdom, faux righteousness. It's
like somebody who grocery shops every 2 weeks. She grocery shops on a Monday. That following Wednesday, she decides she needs to be carnivore, but she's been pro-carb the whole grocery trip. So guess what? For the next week and a half, she's just not going to eat anything because there's not any food in the house. And now she's going to make everyone suffer for it. And the husband's like, what's going on? And she says, well, I decided I needed to be carnivore, but I spent all the money on it. Like, this is how women think. That's why I'm saying it.
Yeah, men do the same thing. I mean, you see one Instagram reel from somebody who looks really confident and they have a lot of gravitas. They look very persuasive, and they say, like, did a recent study showed that brain health increases 172% if you enter into ketosis. Therefore, I just made that up. It's like one really confident, really well-placed thing. We're persuadable creatures, especially when someone's like follows the online formula of introduce problem, introduce consequences of problem, introduce solution, and then the solution is usually like, and buy this thing. And then of course, like, and we're often easy to persuade. So we need to be slow to adopt these whole new orthodoxies on subjects like this. And I want to end with this last pair of questions. How does self-indulgence rob a household of joy? How does hyper-scrupulosity rob a household of joy?
Oh man. I think the the wickedness ditch just robs you of like the joy of a clean conscience and like real freedom from sin. And then the hyper-scrupulosity probably just robs you of a lot of laughter and a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of cinnamon rolls or something else. I don't know.
I can even imagine a scenario where someone becomes hyper scrupulous and they're like, studies show that people who laugh 10 times a day are more healthy.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. It's so true. It's so true. I've listened to podcasts like that. Yep.
Calm down. You're like, calm down. Be normal. Stop being a weirdo. Right. Yeah, it definitely.
Radio vibes.
When you teach as commandments of God the traditions of men, and you don't distinguish between your opinions and landing of a principle and the principle itself, it robs people of joy around you because you're acting like God. Like that's the fundamental thing. You're not fearing God. You're acting like God. You're saying, my opinions are divine fiat. And the thing is, any mastery other than the mastery of the true God is slavery and death. So even if you're mastering people to yourself, you're not God. You're a steward of God.
Yeah, that's really important as a mother and a wife.
So I think it's important for us to remember these things. Let me end by just saying, remind you guys of our upcoming conference. It's about a month and a half away at the point this episode comes out.
Wow.
So we'd love to have you join us. And particularly, I want to highlight our singles mixer that is coming, that will be one of the first evening of the conference, we do our singles mixer. So we do like an opening session there, and then immediately we kick out the singles to go to the singles mixer. And it's really well planned. It's not just a random like, hey, go mingle awkwardly in a room for the next hour with some bad hors d'oeuvres or something like that.
It could be awkward if you decide to be awkward, though.
You could be awkward.
Don't be awkward.
It's structured. It's helpful. We think it through, plan ahead of time, have volunteers. It's really well done. And it's resulted in several marriages so far of the great variety and babies. So, and in that order, to be clear. To be clear.
Yes.
So we charge for the men, but the women are $1 because as it should be. But we do the dollar price for the women is mainly so that we can make sure we have them sign up and do the intake form and that sort of thing to make sure that you're qualified for a singles mixer in the first place. But check that out along with our whole conference. It's going to be a great time here in Ogden, June 12th to the 14th. We've got some great speakers coming out. Ben and I are going to be doing a live Haunted Cosmos with live sound design, live music. I'm going to be putting on a concert. By the way, hope you're all enjoying the new album. It's been out as you listen to this. It's been out for
about a month.
About a month, yeah. As I record this, it hasn't quite come out yet, but hope you guys are enjoying that. I'll be doing a live concert there, and we're just going to have a great time. We've built in more time for hanging out, getting to know one another, networking, that sort of thing. There's a pastor's breakfast, a business mixer, just a lot of opportunities, capping it off with Sunday worship and then a barbecue in the park. So come hang out with us. It's going to be a good time. Whole family's welcome. It's kid-friendly. And but other than that, thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next time on Bright Hearth.